So it's the summer of 1997, and I'm a fellow at Tanglewood Music Center in Lenox, Massachusetts. I have a roommate who's a singer, and she has a big performance with the orchestra scheduled toward the end of the summer. She's an early riser, and every morning, as soon as she wakes up, she sits down at a little desk in our room with her score and mentally practices through her piece for about 20 to 30 minutes. Meanwhile, I'm just sort of waking up around the time she finishes and heads to breakfast. This is literally what she did every day of the summer for the several weeks leading up to her performance. Here's what I learned from that. Mental practice works. It can save practice time, and it can give you a huge boost of confidence in the final performance. Hi, I'm Dr. Kate Boyd, and today's video is about mental practice. I always get really excited about this topic because mental practice is so transformative. Mental practice is a secret weapon you can use in your own practice, and 99 times out of 100, people neglect this important but totally learnable skill. In this video, I'm going to talk you through the benefits of doing mental practice and how to get started. You're going to want to watch through to the end where I'll give you a couple of actual tactics to try in your own practice. So let's get right into it. There are three components to playing the piano. The physical, which is what we do with our fingers and body. The emotional, which involves expression at the piano. And the mental, which involves the brain imagining the music you're playing and thinking. When we talk about practice tactics, usually we focus on the physical side of playing. However, mental practice is super important because it supplements the physical aspect of practicing and uses a completely different part of your brain. The danger of not doing mental practice is that you'll learn your music on a superficial level and it'll just be in your fingers. And then when you go out on stage, the nerves you feel can cause all kinds of problems because you don't really know the music. You just played it over and over enough times that your fingers got used to the patterns. It's just so easy to sit at the piano and practice and let your mind wander. Has that ever happened to you? Do you sometimes find yourself practicing and then realize at some point that 20 minutes have passed and you have no idea what you've been doing? This is surprisingly common, which is one of the reasons that it's so important to plan your practice time and keep a practice journal. And this is where mental practice can really help. It actually takes a lot of concentration to do mental practice, and it's pretty tiring for your brain to do. So most student musicians don't bother with it, even though it ends up saving you time. By the way, just in case you're watching this video and still wondering exactly what mental practice is when you mentally rehearse your music when you are away from the instrument. Mental practice happens inside your head, but it's a very active process. It's a practice technique you can and should use at any stage of the learning process. Also, you can do mental practice at any level, whether you're a beginner, intermediate student, or an advanced student, or whether you're a young person or an older person. Sometimes students feel intimidated by the idea of mental practice because it's so, quiet. And therefore, it's really hard to know if you're doing it right. Because we play an instrument that actually makes noise in the room, it's easy to be somewhat skeptical that there's actually any point to doing mental practice away from the instrument. I think this is partly because this is what mental practice looks like. But here's the thing. You already do mental practice in other parts of your life. Here's an example. When you study for a test, does your preparation involve exclusively reading the textbook or your notes out loud, hoping to memorize them by rote, syllable by syllable, or word by word? Of course not. That would be a huge waste of time. When you study for a test, you might sit quietly at a desk and go over your notes and readings. Sometimes you might say a word or phrase quietly out loud or reorganize your thoughts, writing down bullet points or phrases to clarify things for yourself. If somebody were watching you quietly study, it wouldn't look like much was going on. But inside your brain, lots of associations are being made, and there's a lot of repetition in review of test material. And so, mental practice is an important way to really engage with the music, where you're imagining it in your mind and mentally rehearsing the music, how it sounds, how it looks on the page, how it feels in your fingers, and all without physically playing the piano or your other instrument. One book that had a huge impact on my thinking about mental practice is called Piano Technique by Walter Gieseking and Karl Leimer. Gieseking was a concert pianist, particularly well known for his interpretations of Debussy and Ravel, and Leimer was his teacher. Basically, Leimer wrote this entire book about his method of teaching, which relied very heavily on the use of mental work. If you have any interest in this topic whatsoever, I really strongly recommend this book, and I'll put a link to it in the description section of this video. Effective mental practice relies on the ability to hear music in your head, which is sometimes called inner hearing. Just like many skills at the piano or any instrument, you can strengthen your inner hearing with consistent practice. Have you ever had an earworm? That's a song fragment or a jingle from a commercial that floats through your head for several days that you just can't get rid of. Or maybe you involuntarily imagine some fragments of the music you're playing on your instrument while you're doing other things. That happens to me all the time. Sometimes while I'm doing the dishes or driving, I'll become aware of an ongoing soundtrack inside my head of music that I'm currently practicing or music that my students are playing that we've worked on together at a lesson. This is inner hearing at work. Now with mental practice, you can learn to redirect this kind of involuntary inner hearing into something that's conscious and targeted. It's possible to develop the ability to hear a piece of music you're working on so vividly in your head that you can discern every detail of it with great intensity, almost as if it's happening in the room or you're producing the sound yourself. Inner hearing feels similar to reading words. When you read a book, a voice is saying the words inside your head, but no sound is occurring in the room. But one important difference between inner hearing and reading words is that we tend to read in our head at a faster rate than the words are spoken, whereas inner hearing happens at the rate that the piece would be played out loud. Mental practice tends to happen in real time, so if you're going through a 10-minute piece, it will take you 10 minutes to go through it and imagine it in real time if you don't make mistakes that you need to fix in your head, of course. If you're mentally practicing it under tempo, which is something I do all the time, it'll take the same amount of time to imagine it as it takes you to play it under tempo. So here's how I do mental practice. When I do mental practice, I sit at a desk or someplace where I can sit upright. For me, this is important because otherwise I'm likely to doze off or fall asleep. Sometimes I sit at the piano to do it. I open my score and I look at the notes and I imagine the music in my head. And I focus on these three things: the way it feels inside my hands, although I'm not moving my fingers, the way it sounds in my head, and the expressive markings. I try to hear everything just the way I want to play it. Another way I do mental practice is to go through the score without looking at the music and imagine it that way in every detail, but obviously I can only do that after a piece is memorized. When I do that kind of mental practice, I usually have my score nearby so I can consult it when I have places I can't picture clearly. This is a great way to reinforce or practice memorization. If you've never done mental practice before, I suggest you start by doing it just a few minutes every day. Learning to do mental practice is like exercising a muscle. You don't just go to the gym and bench press your weight when you haven't been working out at all. You start out gradually, maybe with the 3-pound hand weights, and work your way up over time. The more you practice it, the better you'll be able to do it, and the more it will help your performing and progress at the instrument. Getting started can be as simple as playing a few notes on the piano, trying to hear them in your head, and then playing them again to check. In fact, if you're doing mental practice with your score, I recommend sitting at your instrument, and if you get mentally turned around or disoriented, then you just touch a pitch or play a pitch to reorient yourself and continue from there. So now I invite you to take the mental practice challenge. Choose one movement or short piece of music you're working on and then do mental practice on it every day for 7 days. Maybe you'll do it first thing in the morning like my roommate at Tanglewood did, or last thing before going to sleep so your brain can process it overnight, which is what I often do. Let me know your results in the comments. If you liked this video, you can click on some of my other videos on practicing here and here. Also, be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel, as well as share it and leave a comment below because it'll help other people find the Piano Prof. I'll see you next time, and happy practicing.